Hello, and welcome to Murder Made Fiction, a podcast that looks at fictionalized adaptations of true crimes. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jen.
We're joined by a very special guest. So we
Hmm.
have podcaster and author Brian Raftery, whose new book, Hannibal Lecter, A Life, is out February 10th. I'll just show it so that people can
Yes.
know to look for it. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. And we would
Hmm.
love it if you could just give us a primer. What is the book about and how did you decide to write this?
Well, thanks for having me. It's a funny thing because it is a biography of a fictitious character. But I have always loved The Silence of the Lambs. I have a very distinct, strange memory of when the movie came out in 1991. I was in high school or middle school, and I was one of those kids who definitely sat in the back of certain classes, like reading Mad Magazine or Rolling Stone or Premiere. So I distinctly remember reading Peter Travers' review of this movie and just sitting at my desk being like, "This is a movie? Like this is actually a good movie?" Like because it was a huge rave, and I'd heard of the book, but at that point, my horror was mostly in terms of books, was mostly Stephen King, and then 80s slasher movies and stuff like that. So the idea that there was all of a sudden like a critically acclaimed, sophisticated horror drama about a guy who eats people, like I was
Wow.
kind of shocked by it.
Hmm.
And I didn't see it in the theater. I was only 14 or 15, and I was actually telling my mom recently, I was like, "You didn't let me see Silence of the Lambs in the theater," and she's like, "You didn't care," and I was like, "You're right. I was too afraid to see it." I mean, I was like, I've been using that whole excuse to my mom for many years now that she'd let me see enough horror movies, but in all honesty, I was probably too freaked out. But it became a movie I was obsessed with for many years. It was like the first Criterion I ever bought. It was the first movie I taped from a laser disc to a VHS from my video store. So
Oh,
again,
wow.
it's a movie that's been in my mind a lot. And when Hannibal the novel came out, it was a very exciting time, and I was very psyched for that. I saw Manhunter, and so for years I've wanted to write about Silence of the Lambs in some way because the movie is obviously so great, and its impact is decades after where people are still referencing this movie. But I could never quite figure out a way to make it quite work. And I had this really great editor at Simon and Schuster who was like, "What if the book was just about Hannibal Lecter as a character?" And so what you did was you don't treat him like a real person, but you look at his kind of cultural biography. So what I did for the book was I go into the making of Manhunter, Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Rising, Hannibal, those films. I go into the making of Hannibal, the TV show, and I look a lot in the writing of these books that Tom Harris did. And I was really lucky because even though Tom Harris is like a genuine literary recluse, like from what I can tell, he's given three extensive interviews in 50 years.
It's so
So
wild.
there's no way he's going to talk to me. He's crazy. But I was very lucky in that I was able to talk to people who worked with him. I was able to go through Jonathan Demme's archives at the University of Michigan,
Yes.
which has faxes between him, and Tom Harris. So research-wise, it was a blast. I also spent way too many mornings waking up at 5 a.m. and realizing that I had like six articles about Ted Bundy on my computer for the night before, and I was like, "Oh, this is a very unsettling way to start your day." So my respect to people who can live in the true crime world 24 hours a day. I don't know how you do it without getting massively depressed or freaked out in the middle of the night. So hopefully the book is looking at not only how these movies were made and their impact, but also sort of looking at how Hannibal Lecter became such a kind of cultural icon, why people love him so much, and also looking at how, I have kind of a theory that the true crime movement that we're seeing now, a lot of the seeds of that are kind of in the success of Silence of the Lambs and the serial killer culture that followed. Because I came of age in the 90s, and serial killer movies were everything after Silence of the Lambs. I mean, it
Oh,
was, that
yes.
was the whole culture. That was when I started seeing, Jeffrey Dahmer books and in like, very mainstream bookstores, and
Hmm.
the New York Times would cover. Anyway, you all know this, but for me to go back and connect all those dots of like what this movie and this book did when it came out and what Hannibal Lecter kind of did to popular culture was a lot of fun despite the high body count involved in the research.
Well, and I think if you somehow managed to live under a rock and you don't know the name Hannibal Lecter, which I can't imagine anyone over the age of 10 wouldn't know that name,
Right.
the book's title does present as a biography for a real person.
Yeah.
And I love the inclusion of a life because you are really writing about a lifespan of a character, but it's a special character that you're able to do that for because I don't think there are many. What makes Hannibal Lecter special?
I've thought about this a lot about, because he still has this impact. I mean, as you both know, it's like Donald Trump was still talking about Hannibal Lecter just 2 years ago, that campaign trail, and
Oh my
there's
gosh.
Funko Pops, and like I saw some kids, little kids wearing like Hannibal Lecter masks at Halloween last year around LA. So there's still
Wow.
this visibility for him, which is wild to me because when you read Red Dragon, the first book, Hannibal Lecter's in that book for maybe 11, 12 pages.
Yep.
When
Hmm.
you read Silence of the Lambs, he's in it more, but he's still not the majority. I
Still
mean,
not a ton. No.
Yeah.
yeah, even the novel Hannibal that came out in 99, I mean, the first 100 pages are all about Clarice Starling. So I think one of the reasons why he has endured so long, obviously, Anthony Hopkins' performance, who's won an Oscar, is kind of one of the most remarkable kind of on-screen, just truly chilling performances.
Hmm.
But I think it's because he's so elusive. I mean, I think it's the fact that, 11 years passed between the Silence of the Lambs novel and Hannibal. Tom Harris would just take this character out of circulation. And so he kind of grew in everyone's minds, kind of bigger and bigger in the years he was away. But I also think the thing about Hannibal Lecter is when you read the books and kind of when you rewatch the movies, this sounds weird, but like I have no aims to be a serial killer. But if I were, like, I probably want to be like him because he's first of all he's incredibly catty. He's
Hmm.
very smart and he's got remarkably good taste. I mean, he's kind of like the best, especially when you start researching real life serial killers at a certain point, and some of these guys are just the most terrible people, like
They're
these
awful. Yep.
complete
Hmm.
dipshit ding dong scumbags who have been glorified. And you're like, well, I can see why people would put Hannibal Lecter like high up, like, hey, I don't want to eat someone's liver, but if I was going to, I would not mind driving a Bugatti once in a while and having really nice chandeliers and good taste in champagne and caviar. I mean, he makes it look like not a secure life or a particularly satisfying one, but he's pretty happy a lot of time, especially in the early books, and when he's on the loose in Hannibal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even when we get to Brian Fuller's TV adaptation, right?
Yes.
He's this dapper gentleman, but also you think, oh well, he's not just going out and killing people willy nilly. He has morals and
Yeah.
a definition of why he will go after certain people. And I love that eat the rude became
Yeah.
this almost calling card for our
Hmm.
generation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think Fuller's show does this better than any of their screen adaptations, which is that he's very curious about human nature. I mean, he's a seeker. He is a true intellectual. And the one thing that's so great about the NBC show is that he really is kind of like learning from these people. You see him kind of he's trying to understand people, trying to figure out people, which is kind of a fascinating way to look at a serial killer. Again, like you said, he's not just like angry at someone. There are reasons why he does it, either for revenge or for research, which is like kind
Hmm.
of a fascinating which is really fascinating. And I think that's again, it's the fact that he is so smart and kind of relatable in some ways. I think has made him this, again, this guy who went from like being in 10 or 12 pages of a book almost 50 years ago to like being a Funko Pop now. He's still out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Well, and
absolutely.
speaking of research, how did you approach this project and how did you decide what to include and what not to include?
Well, when it came to Tom Harris, I included every single thing I could find. I mean, again, he did 3 interviews, one of which has been out of print for 50 years, and thank God, a wonderful librarian who's one of the first people I thank in the book.
Mm.
I think maybe in the New York, maybe at NYU or Columbia, just happened to find this like 2 page interview he did. So, I mean, anything I found, whether it was that interview or this public access interview he did several years ago or his New York Times profile, I mean, I took every clue I could. I talked to some people who worked with him. I went through whatever correspondence I could find between him and Jonathan Demme or the producers, his intros. So for Tom Harris, I knew that I basically had to take whatever I could get. For the Silence of the Lambs, there was, I had this wonderful experience where the University of Michigan has Jonathan Demme's archives, and the people there are fantastic. They have a bunch of directors' archives there, and they basically were like, we have 13 or so boxes if you want to come out here for a week. And I went out there and basically spent 8 or 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, just going through and it was just a dream. Like I've told many of my friends who are movie fans this, but just like imagine a movie that you love, that you have thought about for years, decades, and someone just opens a bunch of boxes and says, "Here's every question pretty much answered about this movie you've ever had." It
Wow.
was
Amazing.
wonderful, and there's also a lot of like stuff. There's also a lot of extraneous stuff. So for Silence of the Lambs, it was really kind of taking what I got from those 13 boxes and being like, okay, what tells the actual story
Mm.
of this movie and of this character? And there was a lot of great stuff. One of my favorite things I found in there was a radio transcript from like I guess kind of a morning zoo show that Anthony Hopkins had done after the movie had come out. And again, stuff like this is not online. Like this is like a
Right.
faxed. This is like back when movies would come out. The publicist was in charge of collecting every single talk show transcript, everything. And so it was like women calling into Anthony Hopkins being like, "Oh, will you say my name is Hannibal Lecter?" And I was like, "This is the best
Oh
thing I've ever found."
boy.
Like
Yeah.
it's just I wish I could hear it, but like even just reading that stuff, like it's just every document I had one or two I found had one or two little details like that. So I was kind of trying to tell the story. And again, you could do an entire book on Silence of the Lambs. You have to be really judicious.
Hmm.
But you know, one of my favorite interviews for the entire book was I called Bruce Valanche, who's a longtime comedy writer who's written all these famous Oscar ceremonies, and I talked to him about how he and Billy Crystal did this whole Hannibal Lecter parody on the Oscars this year because that was a huge sign of how big Hannibal Lecter had become. I mean, Billy
Uh-huh.
Crystal opens the Oscars as Hannibal Lecter, which
Yeah.
again, he's in the movie for like 25 minutes or something, and he became the whole Oscar night opening kind of gag.
Hmm.
So stuff like that, just trying to hone in on stuff that fascinated me that maybe people didn't know about or forgot about. But there's so much more. I mean, there's, you know, any of those archives, anyone who's gone through archives of a filmmaker or a writer, there's so much stuff that you have to unfortunately be like, I can't use this, but
Yeah.
it's wonderful, you know?
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
curate. You just have to. I
Yeah.
mean, nobody wants to read 1,000 page. Well, maybe some people actually do want to read 1,000 page book, but no, I mean, I think the sort of juicy anecdotes and fun little asides that you pack into the book are so interesting because, you know,
Hmm.
Jen and I are relatively familiar with all of these titles, you know, horror
Yeah.
fans, we've seen them all. And you think you know the history of a
Yeah.
production, and then you read something like this and you go, oh, there's avenues that have been unlocked. So it's so exciting as a reader to get those
Hmm.
little nuggets.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I hope that some days they can digitize all these archives because there's so much fascinating stuff in there that I'm sure someone else could do their own entire alternate making of Silence of the Lambs. And then when it came to Hannibal and Hannibal Rising and Hannibal the TV show, I mean, I got to interview Brian Fuller. You know, I talked to the director of Hannibal Rising. I talked to one of Tom Harris's editors. But you know, I had been there when Hannibal the novel came out in 1999. I was working at Entertainment Weekly, and I remember the buzz like in New York of that book, and everyone kind
Oh
of
yeah.
complaining. Yeah, like everyone complained that like the day it came out, it's like this is 700 pages. How do I take this on the subway? It's hardcover. You know, I remember that. So that whole excitement was really fun to dive into the research of that too, because it was, you know, that and the Phantom Menace came out that year, and those were two like these pop culture villains were coming
Yeah.
back, and they were so extensively covered. So some of that research, just as archival older stories, were a blast to go through. I love that stuff.
Yeah. Can I ask a follow-up? Just because it does feel like the specter of Thomas Harris hangs over the book,
Hmm.
and you're very clear that he's like inaccessible. He does
Yeah.
not like the publicity. Like even for him to get recognized in public is not his favorite thing. Did
Yeah.
you try to reach out to him and see if
Oh
you could
yeah.
nail him down? And it was just
Oh
like,
yeah, no, I
no.
reached out to his agent. They were said no, and then at a certain point, someone else in the process, I think, was going to reach out for me. And then at some point, I found what was purported to be an older email of his, which someone verified was an older email, and it got bounced back right away. So,
Oh.
you know, and I would have loved to talk to him, and I'd be especially interested in him hearing from him now because I would be like, I hope I got everything right. I really tried to.
Hmm.
But look, I mean, I think it's to his credit. I mean, I think it's so rare to have an actual pop cultural mystery at this point.
Hmm.
Yes.
And you know, maybe he'll come out now and do an interview at some point. I mean, he's in his 80s. I don't know if he's got another book in him or what he's working on, but I mean, has any author of the last 30, 40 years like kind of quietly enjoyed a better life? I mean, these books sold 50 million copies,
So
travels around the
wild.
world. He studies cooking in France. He's well known wherever he goes, and I think he's probably had a blast, and most people wouldn't recognize him. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, I think the majority of people wouldn't.
Yeah.
No,
I was really
no.
charmed by the anecdote where he was called for jury duty. And they were like, "Oh, have you written
Oh
anything
yeah,
familiar?" He's like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
just one of the
yeah.
best books of all time, you know." But yeah, reading those sections, I honestly was like, maybe I should take some time off social media and like be a little less accessible.
Be a
I mean,
little
it didn't make
mysterious.
it didn't
Yeah,
make him more prolific. It wasn't like he was
that's
writing a new
true.
book every year, but he was
That's
definitely.
the thing.
I if Tom Harris was ever on like anything but Facebook, I would be shocked. Like he
Yeah.
just strikes me as someone who would much rather be reading for 12 hours a day and sitting out by his beautiful, you know, Florida mansion than probably arguing with people on Instagram about stuff.
Yeah, who can
Yeah.
blame
I
him?
will say, as we're all podcasters, and then Jen and I write film criticism, much like you used to, and I gather you're sort of shifting away into more of these areas now. But I found it so relatable to hear how he would sit down and agonize,
Yeah.
just struggle to get the words out. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of why I love podcasting, because I can just run my fucking mouth off, and
Uh-huh.
then occasionally I'll try to get a couple words down in a review or something.
Look, if
Hmm.
Tom Harris wanted to launch a podcast network tomorrow, I'd be
Right.
subscriber number one.
Sign me up. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask about Clarice because as much as I love Hannibal, for me, she
Yeah.
is the heart. She's one of my favorite
Everything.
characters of all time.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And you include a lot of female FBI agents who informed the development of Clarice Starling. Why was it important for you to include these interviews and these details?
Well, I think for two reasons. One is, I mean, three reasons. One, I was curious to talk to as many people as I could have who were involved, who knew Tom or spoke with him. Two, like, I think the FBI's involvement in these movies and these books is really crucial to sort of understand how he came up with some of these ideas and the relationship he had with it. But third, the most important reason is like, I don't think Hannibal Lecter becomes Hannibal Lecter without Clarice Starling.
Yeah.
I love Red Dragon. I love Manhunter. I think Will Graham is a fantastic character. I think the way Brian Fuller used him was really interesting. But I think the charge of that movie or of this character is those scenes where it's Anthony Hopkins as Lecter and Clarice and Jodie Foster as Clarice. She's one of the best characters ever written. I mean, and again, she dominates that. She dominates the Silence of the Lambs as a novel. I mean, it is mostly her book, and she's a
Hmm.
Yep.
fantastic character. So, I knew that he had spoken to several FBI agents, or a handful of female FBI agents, rather, while researching Silence of the Lambs. And I knew that Jodie Foster had met with female FBI agents for the filming. And it's different influences. The people who worked with Jodie Foster on the movie weren't really involved with the Clarice Starling of the book, and in some ways
Right.
vice versa. But I wanted to talk to them because one of the most fascinating things I found in the John Demme archives was Jodie Foster and Scott Glenn did these photos where they basically those directors' chairs that you see on movie sets.
Hmm.
They had them
Mhm.
made up for a lot of people at the FBI who helped out with the book or helped
Oh,
out with the film adaptation. And so there in the John Demme archives, there's these photos of just Scott Glenn and Jodie Foster posing with all these different names of all these FBI people who helped them. And many
Wow.
of them are female. I mean, not a majority, but there's a lot of female names on it. And it's pretty clear that Jodie Foster took this very seriously. She met with
Yep.
at least one FBI agent that I interviewed. I think she talked to a lot of others. Maybe just for a quick chat, maybe for a lunch. But to me, Clarice, like I said, I don't think Hannibal Lecter, since Clarice is our entry point into understanding Hannibal Lecter, since when she makes that quid pro quo, we are
hmm.
kind of invested in her, and we're trying to figure
Yep.
out, we're trying to get this information from him too, as a viewer. And I think also like that performance, Foster as Starling. The first time you watch Sounds of the Lambs, yeah, it's really messed up and dark and haunting. And I think when you watch it a second or third time, there's a real anguish to Clarice Starling, and there's a
Mm.
real kind of that ending where she's talking to him on the phone, and she's like, yes, she's made it, she's become his FBI agent, but she's still kind of wedded to this guy who's out there. I mean, that's one of the best. I don't think it was intended as a cliffhanger ending so much, but you feel so much for her, and you are genuinely worried for her at the end of that movie. It's
Right.
it's and anyway, it's a remarkable character, and I love Clarice. And they tried to make a TV show work a couple of years ago just about
Oh
Clarice.
boy.
Yeah,
No,
and it didn't last more than a season, I don't think.
it didn't.
No, I
No.
really
And
wanted
it's
to love it,
and-
but you know.
yeah, and I don't think it's because she's not a strong character on her
Yeah.
own, but I do think it's that balance with Lecter that brings out her skills, brings out her interests, brings out her excitement and her frustrations more than it might have with other characters. So yeah,
Yeah.
Clarice is great. I'm glad people love her as a character because I think she is she really is obviously the heart of that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like the
So good.
sum making a grander part, or greater than the sum of
Yeah,
its parts kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, when their fingers touch in that movie, it's like when I was like a teenager, I was like, well, that's weird. That's kind of creepy. Now you watch it now, and it's like it is almost moving. It's two people
Yeah.
who are very
Yes.
isolated, two people who
Hmm.
don't understand, who are mistreated, who feel mistreated or not appreciated or maybe misunderstood, and that is the only connection they really have with anyone else in the movie. I
Yeah.
mean, Hannibal Lecter connects with other people, but he rips their faces off. It's a
Yeah.
very different
Yeah.
different kind of
Yeah.
connection. So yeah,
Yeah. And it's so interesting to watch as you chart the evolution of not just like the FBI's relationship to some of this, but also, what happens when you swap out a Jodie Foster for a Julianne Moore. Because
Hmm.
I like I just recently rewatched Hannibal, and
Okay.
it's actually so much better than I initially gave it credit for. Like
Yeah.
I did not sit easy with the book the first
Right.
time I read it. Like I'm like a lot of people, that ending just did not work for me. And now I actually kind of appreciate what a big swing it is.
Yes.
Hmm.
So it's fascinating. Like one of the things I really, really loved about the book is not just how, okay, this is how each film gets made, but also this is how the character and then the actors and even just like the culture changes to evolve as Hannibal
Yeah.
Lecter ages. And I did find it really funny how he perseveres, how he endures. So I guess you mentioned the kind of rise in popularity of true crime. That's what Jen and I are really all about on this particular podcast. Like, why do you think that works in tandem? Like, should we be giving Hannibal Lecter credit for the rise in popularity of true crime?
I think there's a connection for sure. I mean, I think, look, true crime and serial killer culture, as you all know, I mean, it goes back decades.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say In True Blood was maybe the beginning of this kind of mainstream true crime. I think when you go back to the pulps, I mean, it's always been there, whether it's quote unquote respectable or not. But I do think, I mentioned in the book, there's two things that happened in the 90s that I think really kind of made this explode. One is definitely The Silence of the Lambs, and then a few months after Silence of the Lambs comes out, there's Jeffrey Dahmer, which is immediately the cover of People magazine, real life Silence of the Lambs. I mean, they're
Hmm.
tying it to. And I think Seven also is a very big part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think those two movies combined, I don't want to say legitimized people's interest in serial killers, but it made it such a huge part of the popular culture that maybe people who would kind of sneer at it or wave their nose at it were you couldn't avoid it anymore. Like you had to see
Right.
Silence of the Lambs. You had to see Seven. I don't think in mainstream culture you had to see Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, when it came out. It was a
Yeah.
very big movie,
It's on
but
the
like
margins.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it became a big VHS hit, and I know it was an art house hit. But Silence of the Lambs was the absolute most mainstream a movie like that could get. I mean, it won Best Picture. It
Yeah.
played in
Yeah.
That's
theaters
it.
for like 10 months. And I
Hmm.
think Seven, even though it didn't win as many Oscars, obviously, but that was such a huge culturally impactful movie. And I
Hmm.
think at that point, it was that people were like, I'm fascinated by serial killers. Here's Charles Manson on Deadline or whatever, not Deadline, whatever 2020 or whatever. Here's Jeffrey Dahmer's father selling a book and doing a book tour.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know, which is wild. He got like a lot of money for that. Jeffrey
So
Dahmer's father
much.
got way more money than any author I know at
I
this
was gonna
point.
say, don't
Well,
worry
Or
about
his,
him. He's
yeah,
he's
fine.
doing okay. Yeah.
he is, yeah, he is or did okay. And I think, that I also vividly remember when I was in college when that Spin magazine issue came out with Manson on the cover, and I was like, oh my gosh, like Charles Manson on the cover of Spin magazine, like he just bumped off like the Offspring or whatever, and this is kind of like that's what popular culture was at that point. And
Yeah.
I can't attribute it all to Silence of the Lambs because, as you all know, again, there were lots of movies in the 70s and 80s about serial killers. Obviously, Ted Bundy had been a huge publishing industry phenomenon and TV movies and everything. But I do think it became quote unquote acceptable in the wake of Silence of the Lambs, and then even further once Seven came out.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Right.
I think part of
Yeah.
that comes from having someone like Clarice. Like, I don't have to identify with the killer. I can identify with the person who's trying to fit the puzzle pieces together,
Yeah,
so that I can
yeah,
indulge my curiosity through that channel. One of the things I thought was really fascinating as you're getting into the later chapters of your book is we've passed the buzz of Silence of the Lambs. He's been absent from the cultural consciousness for, I think it's around a decade. And then you're writing about Anthony Hopkins. Like, can we have Hannibal Lecter without Anthony Hopkins? I remember conversations, can anybody but Tim Curry be Pennywise? And then we
right,
see it happen with
yeah.
Brian Fuller's show. Do you have a favorite iteration of Hannibal Lecter?
Oh, I mean, I have. Well, I mean, the Hopkins one was the one I saw first,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's kind of. I think it is the one in Silence of the Lambs. I'm less crazy about the Lecter and Hannibal only because there's so many cutesy one-liners and stuff, and that's kind of not my
He's a little
Hannibal.
Freddy Krueger-esque.
Yeah.
Late Freddy
It's
Krueger.
definitely going for that. Yeah. And I like Freddy Krueger, but I like it's like, in the same way Freddy Krueger should sort of stay in his lane. I sort of feel like,
Keep him
Hannibal should
separate.
kind of
Keep
stay
him
in.
separate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Brian Cox. I mean, he's in Manhunter for, I mean, maybe 8 or 9 minutes,
Yeah.
but he is so funny and truly kind of like, I just kind of nasty and catty, but also kind of like amuses himself that I love. And I think, the performance but the performance in Hannibal, the TV show, it's almost unfair because there's so many more hours of that, and the character
That
is
is
so much
true.
more. And like I said, what I love about that character is treating him kind of as this almost like alien intellectual who's kind of studying humanity.
Hmm.
Because the one thing about that show, it's like when I was watching it for the book, I was like, why do they keep inviting this guy? Because he is a little creepy.
He's
Like
so bizarre.
it's
Yeah.
like, why would you? They'd be like, yeah, should we call Hannibal Lecter into this scene? Be like, I don't know. Like he's kind of like, I don't want to deal with him today. Like, but he is so weirdly charming, and he is like they're as interested in him as he is in them, which is kind of a
Mhm.
Yeah.
fascinating way to make that work. Like no one's repelled by him at first. So I don't know. It would be Hopkins for me, but I feel like that's an easy answer, but it's
Yeah.
probably an honest one.
It can still
Yeah.
be the right answer for
That's
you. That's
true.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess sort of final question. The book makes it suggest like we will never get rid of Hannibal Lecter. Like he has returned in so many different iterations. Obviously, we were reliant on new novels by Thomas Harris
Yeah.
for a long time. We're I mean, who knows? Maybe one of these days we'll just randomly get an announcement that he's going to be dropping a new book or something. But I imagine he's also kind of done with the character. Like he's released another book that had nothing to do with Lecter. So
Mm.
we'll
But it could
see.
happen. I mean,
It could
he could have
happen.
another Hannibal novel. It would not surprise me if like whenever he passes the next 10 years, if he has like a posthumous Hannibal, it would not
Oh.
surprise me.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, he's
I
just such a
guess
secretive guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
the question that I have is do you think we will see the return of Lecter in some other form? Like, will we just start remaking The Silence of the Lambs or Red Dragon another time and so on? Like, do you think we're done with the character or will he just always come back?
I don't think we're done. I mean, there's a lot of complicated rights issues for the screen versions of Silence of the Lambs and Red
Yeah.
Dragon, and maybe they've ironed those out. But the TV show, what the TV show did so well was prove that you could take these parts of these various books and make it
Mm-hmm.
feel A, like a completely new story, but B, those books are so loyal to Tom Harris's particular writing style and narratives. So I think it would require someone really, really smart. I think if whoever owns the rights to Silence of the Lambs or Manhunter wanted to make a cheapo cash in, like let's reboot it right away, I think you could get a couple weekends out of that at the box office, and I think
Hmm.
Right.
people would be very excited by the casting. But I think it would just become like it would become like the Roger Moore James Bonds, where people are like, yeah, these were not all that great. We really didn't need this. I know Brian Fuller would really love to do Silence of the Lambs as a TV show,
Yes.
and I do think there's something in the Hannibal novel. It is such a grotesque and kind of dragging book, but I do kind of love some of the stuff in there about Hannibal in Italy, in Europe, in his kind of retirement. And I wonder if that's
Mm,
like maybe that's a story they could tell, maybe as a cheat, kind of fill in those blanks more.
Hmm.
Because I
right.
do think there's an appetite now for like TV, like kind of beautiful settings. Like I'm not saying do the White Lotus as Hannibal, though. Actually, now that I'm picturing that, maybe that's actually not the
I
worst
mean,
idea.
hey,
I mean,
copyright, copyright.
but if it
Yeah.
was like Hannibal goes to a different beautiful city and different
Resort.
continent every time,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Just cut his way through. Who
I
committed the
mean,
yeah,
murder? It's always Hannibal
it's always
Lecter.
Hannibal.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
the real Hannibal of like Europe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, look, you could also, it's so funny. Last night, for reasons I do not understand, me and my wife, my older daughter, just watched the Murder She Wrote rerun. I'm like, you could do
Yes.
Hannibal Lecter as like a Jessica Fletcher, just like
Yeah.
solving mysteries, which is kind of what he was doing on the TV show.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to take the character. But I think you have to be so careful because, like I said, I think his power lies in how restrained he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Hannibal TV show, even the pilot, I don't think he shows up for the first half hour or so. So even that
Nope.
show was judicious in how they used him. So whoever has the rights to Hannibal, like I say, go for it, but like make him a background character or make
Yeah.
him the second most interesting thing in the show because if you do too much of him, you get that like Hannibal movie kind of like goody goody and licking his lips
Hmm.
almost, and then
Yeah.
it can get a little too much.
Yeah. You're saying
Yeah.
take one
He's
Hannibal off
almost
before you leave the house, right?
there. You
Yes,
go.
exactly. You're right. Yeah. Layer for the Hannibal seasons. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Fantastic. All right. So, Brian, tell us where can people find the book? When does it come out? How do they get in touch with you if they want to pick your brain more about all of this?
Oh, sure. It's called Hannibal Lecter: Life. It's coming out February 10th. There'll be an ebook. We just finished doing the audiobook, which was very
Nice.
fun because I had to read some. I did it, and I got like 50 pages in and I'm like, oh, I forgot I have quotes from the book in here. So I did not do a Hannibal Lecter voice, but I had to do it just enough that it distinguished it. I was not trying to copy anyone's voice, so that would have been a nightmare. But it was fun to read those lines. Like, it was a really good time.
Oh.
And if you want to reach me, I'm on Instagram, I'm on X still, though I don't know what really X is anymore. Or you can look, my email is brianraftery@gmail. I'm pretty easy to find / harangue, if you'd like.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, folks, we would love for you to check out the book. Once again, yes, Hannibal Lecter, A Life.
Thanks so much.
It's out February 10th. Brian, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us. It was lovely
totally.
to pick your brain a bit more.
Absolutely.
This was awesome. No pun intended. I hope. Don't want to.
Oh, yeah.
You've already said the word appetite, so I love that.
That's true. I forgot about that. Yeah. Thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent.